The nurse thought I was sleeping. I let her believe it. The room smelled like disinfectant and old flowers. Machines breathed for me in soft, obedient rhythms. My body lay still, cooperative, the way they like their patients, harmless, quiet, already halfway erased. That's when I felt the paper. Light, careful, slid beneath my fingers like something ashamed of being touched. I didn't open my eyes. Footsteps hesitated. A throat cleared. Someone stood there longer than necessary, waiting for something. Gratitude, maybe, or relief. Then the door closed. I waited 3 more breaths before I looked. My son's handwriting hadn't changed since childhood. Sharp angles, heavy pressure. Always trying to prove something. You're a burden we can't afford. The house is sold. Enjoy your new home at Pinewood Manor. There was a smiley face at the end. He'd drawn it crooked, like when he was 10 and pretending not to care. My heart monitor ticked faster. Not from shock, from confirmation. I turned the paper over slowly, feeling the tremor in my fingers settle into something colder, something usable. On the blank back, I wrote just 3 words. Then I rang for the nurse and asked for a pen cap. I needed the ink to dry. I had suspected him long before the note. Suspicion is a quiet thing. It doesn't scream. It rearranges furniture in your mind while you sleep. It started with the way he spoke to the doctors, over me, never to me. With the sudden interest in my finances, the gentle questions that were anything but gentle. Just planning ahead, he'd said, smiling too fast. Planning. That word again. I remembered my wife's smile when she lied. The way she'd touched my arm to soften the blow of truths she never intended to tell. I buried her 10 years ago, or so I thought. Grief makes you generous, blind. I let my son take over the bills when my hands began to shake. I let him drive me to appointments. I let him think weakness had made me stupid. From the bed, I watched him text in corners, lower his voice when I entered rooms. I noticed how Pinewood Manor appeared in conversation before it ever appeared on paper. Just in case, he'd said. Just in case I became inconvenient. The house was the last thing I had not surrendered. The walls still knew my name. The floors remembered my footsteps. My wife's perfume was still trapped in the upstairs closet, waiting. Sold. He hadn't even waited for me to die. I folded the note neatly. My pulse steadied. Denial never came. Only a clean, sharp clarity. He thought this was mercy. I thought it was theft. While the hospital slept, I worked. Illness slows the body, not the mind. I asked for my personal effects. I asked for privacy. I asked the right questions in the right order. The kind of questions that sound harmless if you don't know what they're hunting. The trust documents were still valid, untouched, unaltered, filed where I left them. My wife had insisted on it, back when love still felt permanent. She'd been careful, almost guilty. I hadn't understood why then. I understood now. The house had never been mine alone, and it had never been my son's to sell. I checked signatures, dates, transfers. There it was. A forgery so clumsy it almost felt insulting. I imagined his hands shaking as he practiced my name. I imagined the confidence it took to believe I wouldn't notice. I lay back against the pillows and smiled for the first time in weeks. Pinewood Manor. Temporary accommodations for people who underestimate me. The results arrived quietly. No dramatic envelope. No knock at the door. Just confirmation. The house still stood exactly where it always had, legally and irrevocably beyond his reach. The trust had a second beneficiary, a name he'd never bothered to ask about. Not his. I didn't call him. I didn't confront him. I let him live inside his victory a little longer. Let him furnish it. Let him breathe it in. Then I turned the note over again and read the 3 words I'd written. Read the trust. That was all. No threat, no explanation. Truth doesn't need decoration. I asked the nurse to leave it where he'd left his message. On the bed, in plain sight. When he came back the next afternoon, I watched his face from behind half-lidded eyes. He read the front first. Smiled. Then he turned it over. The color drained so fast it looked like a magic trick. His mouth opened, closed. His phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. I felt the shift. The moment power remembers where it belongs. 67 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. Disaster makes people honest. His messages were not apologies. They were calculations, offers, revised plans. When that didn't work, the anger came. Accusations. How could I do this to him? I deleted them one by one. The lawyer handled the rest. The house reverted. The attempted sale flagged. The trust activated exactly as designed. My son learned 2 things that week: that I was not as weak as he'd hoped, and that his mother had loved me enough to plan for betrayal. I was discharged on a Thursday. Pinewood Manor never saw me. I went home. I let the silence settle. There were no more calls after that. I imagine he's still counting. I don't. Some losses don't hurt. They clarify. I raised my son to survive without me. He just didn't realize how soon that lesson would begin.